9. Matthew Ware. While working as a lieutenant at the Kay County Detention Center in Oklahoma in 2017, Matthew Ware purposefully moved 2 black pretrial detainees, D'Angelo Wilson and Marcus Miller, into a cell block that housed known white supremacists. He then ordered for the cells to be unlocked, and as one would expect, the white prisoners attacked Wilson and Miller. Both men were injured, and Wilson received 7 stitches for a wound on his face. Several months later, in early 2018, Ware had been promoted to acting captain of the detention center. He punished a pretrial detainee named Christopher Davis for filing a written complaint about his methods by ordering 2 corrections officers to restrain the prisoner with his arms outstretched for 90 minutes. A statement from the US Department of Justice described how Davis's left wrist was cuffed to the far left side of the bench, while his right wrist was cuffed to the far right side, which caused injuries to the inmate. Ware's conduct later fell under FBI scrutiny, and in 2022, he was convicted of violating the civil rights of Wilson, Miller, and Davis. The jury found him guilty of depriving 2 pretrial detainees of their right to be free from a correctional officer's deliberate indifference to a substantial risk of serious harm, and of depriving a 3rd pretrial detainee of the right to be free from a correctional officer's use of excessive force. In the words of Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark, Ware abused his authority, violated the laws he was sworn to uphold, betrayed public trust, and dishonored the many brave correctional officers who do their job lawfully. As a result of his heinous actions, he was sentenced to 46 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. 8. Teresa Simmons. In 2022, an inmate at the Kent County Correctional Facility in Michigan filed a civil lawsuit accusing a behavioral health counselor of violating him in graphically disturbing ways during his time in lockup. 43-year-old Teresa Simmons was working at the jail as a third-party contractor when she allegedly had inappropriate contact with the prisoner on several different occasions. The handwritten lawsuit, which was filled to the brim with shocking allegations, described how the inmate first met Simmons when he was sent to the hole, a term that usually refers to solitary confinement. He claimed that the misconduct started when she slipped him a note stating that she wanted intimacy every time she visited him. In the inmate's words, "I didn't know what I was supposed to do." He went on to claim that Simmons often knocked on his door with her chest fully exposed and included a description of tattoos she had that would normally be covered by her work uniform. The prisoner also alleged that the counselor encouraged him to expose himself to her. She apparently confided in him that she was getting bored with her husband and even called the prisoner her personal slave. He said he was scared but felt obligated to do as he was told, and that Simmons was aware of his mental health struggles. Perhaps the most incriminating accusation in the lawsuit is the inmate's claim that Simmons acknowledged she could lose her license for the things she was doing and saying. The prisoner further stated that he didn't understand what a driver's license had to do with the situation, apparently not realizing that Simmons was acknowledging how her behavior could put her job as a social worker on the line. The allegations only got more disturbing and included claims that Simmons promised drugs and cigarettes in exchange for daily favors, along with detailed descriptions of the things she wanted the inmate to do. He sought $250,000 in damages as a result of the behavioral health counselor's actions. The prisoner also wrote that he still had some of the notes she'd given him and insisted that he had no reason to lie. In addition to being slapped with a civil suit, Simmons was criminally charged in connection with the case. A verdict has yet to be reached though, since both cases appear to be ongoing. 7. Hosea Lee Jr. In July 2021, federal prosecutors filed an indictment against Hosea Lee Jr., a Bureau of Prisons BOP officer and drug treatment specialist who worked at numerous BOP facilities throughout his 7.5 career with the agency. He was accused of a long list of horrifying acts of abuse against 4 female inmates over a several-month period in 2019 when he was working at the Federal Medical Center in Lexington, Kentucky. Lee's job at the center was to interview inmates regarding their substance use and assess their treatment eligibility and progress. He also led drug education classes and provided group and individual counseling to inmates who struggle with substance use disorders. According to the 14-count indictment, Lee studied his victims' emotional, physical, and psychological histories. Unlike regular officers, he had complete access to these documents, which he used to select the most vulnerable targets. His job position also gave him the ability to get inmates alone without arousing suspicion from other employees. Lee persuaded and groomed his victims with alcohol, cigarettes, and other contraband, including a medication called Suboxone, which is used to treat patients who struggle with opioid addiction. He then took advantage of the women in non-consensual ways, exploiting their weaknesses and intimidating them into staying silent about the abuse. The crooked counselor used threats, manipulation, and physical force to coerce his victims. Lee ultimately pleaded guilty to 5 counts of abusing a ward. In a defense sentencing memorandum, his attorney urged the court to consider the defendant's status as an Iraq war veteran with PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. He also brought up Lee's honorable military discharge and his lack of criminal history, hoping that the judge would lessen his client's punishment. In the end, though, the judge honored the prosecution's wishes and sentenced Lee to 80 months or around 6.5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of post-release supervision. Court documents describe the sentence as an upward departure from the usual sentencing guidelines for the charges Lee pleaded guilty to, but it was a far cry from the 15 years he could have received. 6. Victoria Caliguero. During her time working as a mental health counselor at a Vermont prison in 2017 and 2018, Victoria Caliguero allegedly engaged in inappropriate contact with an inmate she was counseling on at least 20 occasions. Records obtained by VT Digger revealed that authorities began investigating in 2019, around the same time someone filed a complaint against Caliguero. By then, she'd already been fired from her job for allegedly having a relationship with another prisoner. She was also under scrutiny by state licensing authorities, but wasn't criminally charged in that case. According to court documents, a prisoner had found out about the earlier relationship with an inmate and saw it as an opportunity to try getting contraband smuggled into the prison. He approached the man that Caliguero was allegedly seeing and tried coercing him to persuade the counselor to get on board with the plan. However, Caliguero and her secret boyfriend refused to go along with it, and word of the failed plot soon spread to the Department of Corrections. Caliguero's security clearance was revoked as a result, and eventually she was let go from her position. But apparently that was just the beginning of her problems. After the allegations in the second case were brought against her, she was criminally charged. During the proceedings, she agreed to the temporary suspension of her license pending the outcome of the case, but made it clear that by doing so, she wasn't admitting guilt in any way. Caliguero pleaded not guilty, but unfortunately, the outcome of the case is unclear. 5. Megan Woodham. The year 2023 didn't start out great for 30-year-old single mum Megan Woodham, who was put behind bars for smuggling drugs into a prison she used to work at and for using her home as a stash house for a drug ring. It all started when the former prison health worker from Cheshire, England, began sneaking ketamine to drug kingpin Daniel Doran, who was locked up at her workplace. After turning crooked, Woodham also began opening her home to members of a multi-million-dollar cocaine trafficking organization. According to the prosecutor, Woodham formed some sort of relationship with Doran, who used his illegally obtained cell phone to arrange the transport of drug parcels from place to place. Woodham's home apparently functioned as both a storage facility and a waypoint along these routes. Woody and 2 others, including Doran and a woman named Kelsey Higgins, were found guilty of conspiracy to supply cocaine and ketamine. Woodham broke down in tears when the judge handed her a 6-year sentence, even though she received a much lighter sentence than her co-defendants, who were jailed for 15 and 13.5 years. 4. Travis Mullins. All hell broke loose in Greenville, Tennessee, one evening in early 2020, when police responded to reports of a hit and run in the parking lot of a Lowe's home improvement store. Upon arriving at the scene, law enforcement was told that an off-duty corrections officer, later identified as Travis Mullins, had hit the vehicle of a woman he'd been dating. Mullins, who worked for the Cobb County Sheriff's Office at the time, returned to the scene wearing his work uniform and was armed with a gun. An officer managed to disarm him, but he escaped and grabbed another firearm from his vehicle. Mullins pointed the weapon at the responding officers, and one of them fired in self-defense, which resulted in his death. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation released few details following the bizarre tragedy, citing an ongoing investigation. But the news came as a shock to Cobb County Sheriff Armando Fontes, who described Mullins as an honest and hard-working employee of 3 years and a dedicated family man. Fontes told local station WJHL that the 29-year-old loved his job, his children, and his family, and that his actions that fateful night were completely out of character. The sheriff said that Mullins was experiencing some personal issues at the time, which perhaps had something to do with the irrational decisions he made that night. Fontes acknowledged that Mullins' actions forced the Greenville police to defend themselves, but described him as a genuinely good person who would be missed by his colleagues. He also urged people not to judge him by one single action and one single event. On behalf of his staff, Fontes said that their hearts went out to everyone involved in the incident and that they were very glad nobody else was injured. 3. Zao Mara Lobo and Della Savory Mayo. In 2002, a pair of former Miami-Dade County Corrections officers were nabbed by federal authorities for allegedly using children's social security numbers to fund what the South Florida Sun-Sentinel described as their free-spending lifestyles. Zao Mara Lobo and Della Savory Mayo, who were both 32 years old at the time, were accused of stealing the identities of a 3, 12, and 14-year-old in order to pay for plastic surgery and other personal expenses. Their fraudulent activity dated back at least 7 years, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. In early 1995, Savory Mayo allegedly got approved for an auto loan that she applied for using her name and the social security number of a 14-year-old. She fell behind on the payments and owed more than $15,000 when the bank repossessed the car 3 years later. Savory Mayo was also accused of opening 2 credit cards with a 12-year-old social security number. She then used them to pay for tummy tucks for herself and Lobo. Based on police reports, Lobo also opened a credit card using another woman's identity. She then tried getting a loan with a 3-year-old social security number, but was denied. In addition to all that, the pair allegedly racked up another $100,000 in debts that they never made payments on. As a result, they were charged with identity theft, which carries a prison sentence of up to 15 years and a fine of up to $250,000. However, it's unclear how the case played out or if the women were convicted. 2. Alex Toro. 47-year-old Alex Toro was working as a corrections officer in Beacon, New York, when he was accused of moonlighting as a drug dealer in 2022. According to authorities, Toro organized 4 drug sales with an undercover NYPD detective over a 5-week period. During one of his deals, he allegedly sold 250 grams of cocaine with an estimated street value of $9,500. He's also accused of telling the undercover cop that he had a chopper, which is supposedly another term for an assault rifle, and discussing the possibility of selling a handgun. A criminal complaint claims that Toro arranged 3 drug sales from his post at the Fishkill Correctional Facility in Dutchess County, and he had his siblings deliver the goods. During a search of his apartment, officers recovered 1,000 grams of cocaine worth over $40,000, as well as a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun, some ammunition, and $8,000 in cash. Toro is now facing 2 counts of felony drug sale and has resigned from his job, and at the moment, the case is ongoing. 1. Kayla Bergam. 27-year-old Kayla Mae Bergam was working as a corrections officer at a prison in Iowa when she was busted in 2022 for allegedly having a relationship with an inmate. The illicit pair supposedly hooked up on numerous occasions and in various places throughout the jail over a 7-month period, including in a utility closet and the facility's rec yard. Acting on an employee tip, the state's Department of Criminal Investigation launched a probe into Bergam's suspected misconduct. According to an arrest report, the affair began in late 2020 and lasted for 7 months. The pair allegedly had at least 3 intimate encounters, but authorities are remaining rather tight-lipped on the matter and haven't released any further details. Bergam resigned after falling under suspicion. She pleaded not guilty to 3 misdemeanor charges of misconduct with an offender and was released pending the outcome of the case, which appears to be ongoing. Would you rather work at a prison that's notorious for corruption, or at a prison where the inmates run the show and the staff are afraid to keep them in line? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.